Sex trafficking, it's a problem around the world and right here in the Midwest.
The world's oldest profession targets young girls, recruiting them in places your child could hang out. Street outreach is one of the main ways to combat the problem. Fact Finder 12 investigator Rachel Skytta went to Kansas City to find out how some groups are getting victims off the streets.
Well, you don't need to go far to find cases of sex trafficking. It happens in places you'd never expect, possibly even hotels you've stayed in. But more traditional venues like the street, strip clubs, and truck stops are still a problem. And I learned just how difficult it is to get victims out of this lifestyle. Sex for sale. You can spot the signs of prostitution on any city street. What's not as easily recognizable are the scars prostitution leaves on victims.
Oh no, you never forget it. It's always with you.
It's been decades since Chris Wade fell into a world of violence and sexual exploitation.
I got recruited right out of the train station within 5 minutes of being off a train.
Chris was just 18 when a friendly stranger lured her in.
It's like, nobody's the boss of me. Oh, no, we are the boss of you.
She escaped a year later, but Chris says she'll never shake the brutal experience.
I see certain things that happened to me years ago, and I look at them with different eyes now. I have a different perspective now, and I can say, oh, wow, that guy raped me. You know, I still have light bulb moments as I do this work.
That work is with the Justice Project of Kansas City. Chris now helps others escape lives of domestic violence and sexual exploitation.
Once they understand that we have walked in their shoes, it makes the process of opening up much easier.
The Justice Project is one of several nonprofits in the Kansas City area, combating sex trafficking out on the streets.
So this is Independence Avenue.
Helen Taylor, outreach director for the nonprofit Exodus Cry, combs the prostitution tracks of Kansas City every couple weeks.
We'll see girls sitting on the wall here, standing on a corner.
If they see someone they believe is being trafficked, Helen and her team approach the woman with what they call a hope bag, full of items like makeup, hair products, and a list of resources to get out of prostitution.
The streets are a lot quieter than what they used to be like a few years ago, and it's a lot of pimps are selling their women over the internet. They can make more money doing that.
That's why Helen and her team also scope out sites like Backpage, looking for prostitution ads. Those ads often lead them to this particular part of the city, near a truck stop and a stretch of seemingly safe hotels.
So it's possible that there are women being trafficked in this area right now?
Yeah, most likely.
And as you'd imagine, making contact with victims comes with a good amount of risk.
My primary role is just to make sure that the environment in which our team is operating in is safe.
Roger Lester acts as security for the team, helping to make sure the situation doesn't get out of control.
There has been some situations where the pimp was not quite pleased that we were taking their lady off the street.
When we're on the streets, if a pimp comes up to us, we don't confront him or engage, we just politely leave.
The goal is to remove victims from sex trafficking and get them into restoration programs, but convincing them to leave is never easy.
The reality is that most women who are in prostitution or being trafficked don't even recognize that they're victims. They've been so conditioned by a slavery mentality, and they are often too scared of their pimp to ever leave.
The big question, how do these girls end up here in the first place?
Most people think of trafficking as the abduction, the kidnapping, that part, the force. But the majority of traffickers are smarter than that. They know that there's a lot of girls that they don't even have to kidnap. They can recruit them and lure them in under fraud or coercion.
And they go out and they hang around where vulnerable people might be found.
And the people fighting it say no one is safe from sex trafficking.
I was not an abused kid. I wasn't a kid deeply in poverty, wasn't homeless, didn't have a drug addiction, any of that. I was just a kid who was too big for her britches, and there's plenty of them out there.
Sex trafficking still does take place on the street, but about 90% of prostitution has moved online in the past decade. We sat down with the Exodus Cry team as they reached out to victims online and captured their responses in real time. I'll share that part of the story tomorrow on Eyewitness News at 10.
Nearly all prostitution now takes place online.
People can buy services with the click of a button, and predators can groom teenagers more easily than ever before. Rachel Skytta continues our two-part investigation into sex trafficking with how a Kansas City group is seeking out victims online.
Neon signs and shady streets. It's easy to associate these images with sex trafficking and prostitution. But who are the victims at the center of it?
This girl was one girl that we worked closely with, and she was in a brothel in the Midwest for 3 years.
Helen Taylor is the director of outreach for Exodus Cry, a nonprofit working to combat human trafficking in Kansas City and around the world. Without revealing their identities, Helen has found a way to show these victims do exist.
This modern day slavery, most of the time women who are trafficked don't actually have shackles around their ankles, but what is around their ankles are high-heeled stilettos when they're in the life, when they're pimped out onto the streets.
Shoes that once belonged to women trapped in a world of sexual violence and exploitation now represent their freedom.
These are real women, as you say. They're not just an anonymous concept, but these were the very shoes they walked in, they were exploited in. These are their empty, broken chains.
Helen uses the shoes to show the reality of human trafficking, but she knows some victims will wear those shoes forever.
I've done outreach talk to girls along the street before.
That's why Helen and her team do outreach on the street and online, helping victims escape the life.
That page is the kind of central, the Walmart of online prostitution, if you like.
Combing through the dating section on Backpage, looking for women and girls selling sex.
So it's just gone 1 o'clock and we already have ad after ad after ad.
The ads include pictures, phone numbers, ages.
Like here, she looks really young.
And sometimes specific locations. The Exodus Cry team invited us in to see how they contact these victims safely and offer support.
If you want to scroll up a minute.
Helen finds an ad for a 38-year-old woman named Angel.
So I just start by saying, "Hi, is this Angel?"
She gets a response within 2 minutes.
So we've just had a response immediately saying, "Hello, yes," from Angel, who's the lady who is 38.
At this point, Angel thinks Helen is a buyer. Helen responds saying, "How are you?" She then copies a message explaining who she is and how she can help. This time, Angel's reply is different.
So we've had one response from the girl Angel, and she's just said F off.
Helen says it's not uncommon to get that kind of reaction from women who feel like they're being watched on Backpage.
Sometimes the pimp is managing their phone or over their shoulder, but a lot of the time they have, space to think about your text, think about what you're saying and respond in their own time.
Is it typical to have that quick of a response?
Mm-hmm. Especially if a woman's just put an ad up on that day, then she has her phone with her. She's taking call after call. Her phone will be ringing off the hook from guys.
This isn't the only online work they do at Exodus Cry. They're also trying to better understand what buyers respond to by setting up fake ads of their own.
The responses you get are horrifying. A lot of them are very crude and just rude. It took me a little while to, I don't want to say get used to it, but be able to cope with it better.
The team at Exodus Cry knows this work isn't for everybody, and watching women go through the cycle of sex trafficking is painful.
Sometimes it takes a girl going back a couple of times before she comes out long term, and that for me is one of the hardest things to observe.
But Helen says the abolition of sex trafficking starts with education and recognizing the problem.
When members of the community become educated and aware, then they're able to catch the signs when they see it in front of their eyes.
Each case of sex trafficking is different, but here are some warning signs to look out for. If someone is not in control of their own money or personal documents, if they work or live in a place with high security measures, such as blocked windows or security cameras, and finally, if someone says they're just visiting but can't clarify where they're staying. You can find a list of more warning signs in our web story at KWCH.